Her name was Deborah Samuel. Almost 2 months ago, this young Christian Nigerian student was stoned to death by Muslim classmates following an incident on a WhatsApp study group. This assassination, which shocked Nigeria like the rest of the world, is far from being an isolated case. To discuss an expanding spiral of violence in Nigeria, our correspondent in Lagos, Sharafa Abagun, spoke to Nigerian lawyer and activist Dele Farotimi. The latter shared his conviction about how the failure of governance is primarily responsible for the situation. Let's listen to him. Dele Farotimi, hello and thank you for joining us on Initiative Africa. There has been mention of religious tensions, insecurity and a sense of impunity. What have been, according to you, the main triggers of the murder of Deborah Samuel?
Well, it's a culture thing. We have had a situation where for too long, individuals have come to believe that they are in a position to determine who has committed the offense of blasphemy, something that should not in the first place be applying to a non-Muslim. They also know that they will get away with what they have done and nothing will be done to them as a consequence of their actions. So what you will find is that once you have given tolerance for insanity, it multiplies and becomes normal. So the problem with us is nothing unique beyond the fact that impunity has been allowed to overtake our land. There is no consequence. There are no consequences for actions and inactions, and people just do whatever they care to do, knowing that nothing will happen as a consequence of what they have done. For too long, religion had been weaponized in the northern part of Nigeria and allowed to act as it pleases. So people kill in the name of God. They do things in the name of Islam that are not necessarily Islamic, but that are permitted because it suits the political interest of the political leadership of northern Nigeria to turn the other way. That's what you're saying.
What are the reasons behind this increased violence in Nigeria?
First thing first, whatever a society tolerates becomes the culture. Nigeria has had a long history of violence, dating back over a decade. The Boko Haram insurgency, for instance, is well over a decade old. But the particular intensification and increase in the amount of violence, especially in the northern part of Nigeria, the southeast as well, is essentially a function of the fact that the Buhari regime has been permissive. He's generally allowed impunity to reign. So it is not a surprise that there is an upsurge in violence in Nigeria. That is because those perpetrating the violence are well aware of the fact that there will be no consequences for their actions. If you would recall, in the immediate aftermath of the murder, those who were arrested, they were not charged for murder. They've been charged for breach of public peace. And even as watery as those charges are, there were public protests within the Sokoto metropolis. The governor had to impose curfew. That tells you that the society in which she was killed is not shocked or surprised by such killings, which were done in the name of God, but certainly was anything but godly because there was no blasphemy. But the nepotism has enabled impunity, and the impunity has allowed the violence.
What is the role of the vigilante groups, some very large and armed? Are they part of the problem?
The vigilante groups, I would prefer to see them more as indicators than as part of a problem. They are indicators of the presence of a deep malaise. And what is this? It is the implosion of the state, the failure of the state and its incapacity to protect the lives and properties of the citizens that has led to the rise of vigilante groups who are stepping into the gap that should ordinarily have been occupied by the law enforcement agencies, who have become complicit in most cases. So you see that there is a breakdown of trust between the communities and the police force, because the police force are not community-based. So And the vigilante groups are largely community-based. So you find some of them that are regulated by government, and you find some that exist outside the ambit of the government. So the vigilante groups are not in themselves problems, but they are markers indicating the failure of the state, because if the state were to be functioning as it should, and if it were to be the actor that it should be within the space, the one with the monopoly of force, then we wouldn't have any need for vigilante groups. But the vigilante groups are there because the state has failed.
What solutions would you consider the best to break the cycle of violence?
The key reason Nigeria is in the mess it is in is because the state is failing. Law and order has failed. Law and order has failed because the law is not ruling in Nigeria. In the absence of the rule of law, what you have ruling in Nigeria is impunity. So if we are really interested in a resolution of our problems, the truth of the matter is that it would have to be a concerted effort by the state and well-meaning Nigerians who might then become citizens, insisting on the institution and then the rule of law. If the law should rule in Nigeria and equity and justice is equally available to all Nigerians, this will stop. So what you are seeing are essentially the fruits of lawlessness.
Dele Farotimi, for many years you were a lawyer. What have you learned in this capacity, and what made you choose to become an activist?
In the first place, I am not an activist. I prefer to see myself as a revolutionary. I would explain that later on. First thing we must understand is that I read law knowing that the law does not rule in Nigeria. I read law without any blinkers. I knew what I was getting into. I was always aware of the fact that impunity governs Nigeria and not law. But it was necessary to equip myself with a knowledge of the law so that those who elect to act in the name of the law when they are forcing impunity down the throat of the citizen would not be able to act in relation to me, because I will be equipped with the knowledge of the law sufficiently to challenge them on the basis of lawfulness or otherwise of their actions. Now, why I say I'm not an activist is because I know that in my country, Nigeria, no amount of activism will change the status quo. To change Nigeria, you have to change the governing system. Interestingly, the word revolution comes from a French word, revolver, which means to turn around. My interest and purpose is to turn Nigeria around from its current trajectories. It's not, you can't change Nigeria, you can only turn it around. You can change societies that are anchored to law, that are governed by law. My society is not governed by law. I knew that before I was 10 years old. I knew that when I was reading law. I knew that when I practiced law. So I am familiar with the fact that Nigeria is not a place governed by law. So anyone who is trying to work as an activist to change a system that is not designed to be changed and that is not anchored on law wastes his time. I am not wearing blinkers. I understand that if Nigeria does not change its trajectory, it will perish. I'm not an activist. I believe myself to be a revolutionary.
You support Remember, the platform of civil rights. What concrete actions are being taken by Nigerian activists to raise democratic rights awareness among the population?
Well, you must understand first that our problems are so deeply rooted that a lot of people have come to believe that this is normal. We've become acculturated to the insanity, to the point that we just take it in our stride, and until it happens to the individual, nobody really cares. So what we are doing at the level of Remember is two-pronged. What we do is we educate. We seek to inform the people, to challenge their thinking, and then to educate them on the issues. We realize that the Nigerian is essentially not a citizen. He's been decitizenized, if there is any such word. All the things that makes a person a citizen protected by a state has been essentially taken away from the Nigerian. So what we try to do is help the Nigerian understand the fact that he is principally a citizen who has responsibilities and who is equally responsible to the state for his actions and inactions. The second thing we do is we seek to intervene. So when there are issues, maybe a person is wrongly arrested, or as in the case of the NSAS protests where people were murdered, massacred at the toll gate, Ramimba offered and stayed with the victims. We provided legal services for them. We fought their corner, made sure that justice was done, and it was partly as a function of the efforts of Ramimba that the Lagos panel rightly held that there was a massacre at the toll gate in spite of every effort by the state and federal government to cover up the killing that took place there. So Ramimba educates and we intervene. That's what we do.
What is your analysis of the impact that the economic consequences of the war in Ukraine will have on Nigeria?
Unfortunately for my country, we live by the ocean, but we wash our hands with spittle. We were once upon a time the 6th largest producer of crude in the world, but we import all our fuel needs: diesel, petrol, kerosene, including aviation fuel. The war in Ukraine has led to high cost of diesel, of petrol, of all refined products because there is an equal upsurge in the price of crude. But how has that impacted Nigeria? Given the fact that we have no refining capacity as of today, we are having to import every one of our fuel needs at great cost. We are exporting crude without adding value. So our recession is guaranteed as a function of the myopia that governs our country. That is before you start dealing with issues of crude, issues of wheat. We are a net importer. Up until about a few years ago, at least there were efforts at import replacement, and they were planting all sorts of cereals in Nigeria. But with the insecurity, I think it was just a couple of days ago, 40 farmers or thereabouts were slaughtered in Borno. So what you have is an abandonment of the farming communities, which means that we have become more dependent on imported food in a time when we are earning less dollars and we are spending by far more than we are earning. So there is going to be, for me, a devastating effect on our economy as we go forward, and we're already seeing evidences of that with the collapse of our currency. But the worst part, which we might not be paying attention to now, but which we need to pay serious attention to, is the Russian presence in Mali, which will have an effect on the Nigerian security situation eventually. So for us, there is nothing good about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, because it simply means that French and Russian interests are going to be colliding in Mali, and Mali has always been the root and source of the problems that comes to Nigeria security-wise through the Sahel. So we are again going to find ourselves in the crossroads of Western and Russian interests.